The land was silence before names were carved upon its frost.
From the whisper of wind, the first memory began to sing.
Freedom was born, galloping through the breath of endless winter.
Fire and frost shared one heart beneath the northern star.
In her arms, the future trembled like a hidden flame.
Before ink, there was bone. Before words, breath upon ice.
Rivers remembered paths long before men called them home.
He spoke to stars, and stars answered with eternal silence.
Every storm births a nation, dreaming in the dark. From the gaze of the wild, courage learned to breathe.
He reached not for prey, but for destiny's distant light. Heaven painted its blessing upon the newborn earth.
Beneath each mound sleeps a heartbeat, waiting to return.
Before empire,
Even iron learns mercy when winter humbles men.
Faith rose where frost could not conquer the flame within.
The steppe became a sea, and men its silent sailors.
Each spark a promise that tomorrow would remember him.
From sound was born soul. From silence, eternity.
every hoofbeat carved the rhythm of history's first march.
He saw not sunrise, but the awakening of destiny.
Light became movement. Movement became memory.
Trees kept the stories men forgot to tell.
In every storm, the seed of empire begins to stir. Destruction carved the doorway through which creation entered.
From the wound of the earth, faith was reborn.
He rode beyond fear, chasing the promise of dawn. All elements bowed to the birth of one enduring soul. Thus the land awoke, and Russia began to dream.
From water came the voice that called men to gather.
They followed the rivers like veins leading to one heart.
Unity began not in peace, but in shared fear of silence.
A stranger's blade would forge the name that time remembers.
In the glow of night, destiny whispered through smoke. He learned that oaths can outlive the men who speak them. Names became nations when courage found a tongue. Wild answered, and Rus was born in thunder. He saw not land, but a promise of unity through struggle.
Fire became law, shaping the will of a people.
From timber and toil, the dream began to breathe. Commerce spoke before diplomacy ever learned to kneel.
All beginnings crave a boundary to call home. The sky itself signed the covenant of dawn. Civilization begins with the memory of warmth.
The gods watched as men began to forget their faces. Before faith found words, devotion had already found eyes.
Creation and destruction shared the same fire.
Upon these hills, eternity chose to build its citadel.
Life began again, lighter than the weight of empire. Light learned to speak the language of devotion. He claimed no throne, only a destiny that needed a name. Walls did not divide. They defied belonging. They measured the unknown not by miles, but by faith. A city was born to echo the silence of its soil. From the south came faith, dressed as empire.
The tongue of heaven touched the lips of frost.
In surrender, he found the strength to unite hearts.
The river became scripture, flowing through generations. Thus, faith and nation became one breath.
In each flake, heaven rehearsed its eternal hymn. Art became the soul's way of surviving time.
Every mark of faith rewrote the laws of fear.
Between gold and gospel, humanity found its balance.
Joy returned as the oldest form of prayer.
He saw beyond borders, the soul of empire stirring. Strength became peace, carried on iron feet. Beauty became proof that belief could endure.
In the wilderness, civilization whispered its first lullaby.
Work turned to worship beneath the patient sky.
Knowledge flickered like fragile fire against the cold.
Every stitch tied memory to immortality.
Growth hummed like prayer beneath hammer and hymn. Each step a plea, each flame a vow to endure.
Victory slept where vigilance refused to die.
Sound became faith, shaping the air of dawn. Trade became the pulse of empire's newborn veins.
Even play carried the echo of glory's seed. He saw unity as a storm gathering strength.
Every golden age begins beneath a darkening sky.
Faith braced itself for trials already approaching.
Destiny sharpened its blade on the edge of fear.
The wind carried news that would change centuries.
Unity must be defended, or it will dissolve like breath.
Love became armor in the heart of the storm.
Faith walked first, where fear refused to follow. History often rides into silence before the dawn. Even defeat plants the roots of future glory.
The earth exhaled, and Rus endured another dawn.
Resilience became their silent form of prayer.
Cities die and rise as easily as breath on glass. Even ruin became a cathedral for faith.
Hope grew roots deeper than fire could reach.
Winter kissed rebirth with a gentle hand.
The sound of tomorrow was forged in bronze.
The spirit of Rus refused to stay still.
Lullabies became archives of an unbroken soul.
Peace, like snow, covered the wounds of time.
A single figure held the weight of generations.
Memory learned to survive by turning into story.
Beneath stillness, destiny kept moving unseen.
Words became bridges over centuries of silence.
Tranquility is the most dangerous dream of empire.
The next storm always waits in the sound of peace.
Shadows from the east began to stir again.
He knew every empire ends before it knows it's dying.
War approaches quietly, wrapped in the rhythm of hooves. History hides its approach beneath the gentlest veil. A storm of hooves was coming to test the soul of Rus.
Even innocence could feel the trembling of fate.
They hid faith where swords could never reach.
Leadership is born when fear finds its equal.
The night itself became a warning, written in flame.
Every tea became an offering to endurance.
Destiny arrived, wearing the mask of catastrophe.
The heavens wept iron instead of rain. Glory turned to smoke beneath the indifferent sky.
Even sound died when the empire lost its breath. The heart of Rus burned, but its soul did not die.
From ruin rose a people tempered by sorrow.
Sorrow bowed, but from its silence, endurance began to breathe.
Silence reclaimed the kingdom that once sang. Hope sounds clearest when echoed through despair. Even death paused to listen to the wind of memory. From these sparks, Moscow would one day rise. Every generation carries the ember of rebirth. The world turned, and history opened its next chapter. Thus ended Kievan Rus and began the dream of Russia. The horizon trembled before the storm had a name.
The earth itself began to beat with a foreign heart.
From the east came thunder, riding on silence.
The wind carried war long before the first arrow flew.
Faith braced for a storm that mercy could not stop.
Heaven watched its reflection burn upon the earth.
Civilization cracked like ice beneath iron hooves.
Conquest spoke only the language of ash.
Even in ruin, compassion dared to breathe.
The heart of Rus slept beneath the blanket of despair.
The land wept quietly, afraid to disturb its own grief.
The conquerors built empires from the bones of silence.
Power smilled coldly, carved in the calm of victory.
Submission became the currency of survival.
Oppression walked softly, but its echo never faded. Fear became the first language every child learned.
Faith did not die. It simply hid among the ruins.
Memory survived, one trembling word at a time.
Conquest ended, but its silence endured longer. From surrender grew the will to rise again. Hope speaks softly, so despair must lean to listen.
Destiny travels unseen until night shows its reflection.
Silence became sanctuary when words were forbidden.
They dreamed of a city built not of gold, but endurance.
From humble logs, greatness began to breathe. Every hand that built Moscow also built tomorrow.
Faith returned in whispers before it dared to sing.
Leadership often speaks most clearly through stillness.
Gold bought time for roots to deepen unseen.
Patience is the weapon of those who cannot fight yet. Strength no longer shouted, it simply endured.
Moscow became not capital, but sanctuary. The hum of iron replaced the cry of loss. A kingdom's soul often begins as a flicker.
Unity spoke cautiously, afraid of its own echo. Destiny redrew borders with trembling hands.
Peace remained chained to the price of obedience.
He saw that submission could be strategy, not surrender.
The city grew while empires slept.
Faith planted roots deeper than empire's shadow.
Every payment brought another heartbeat of survival.
Suspicion became the bridge between fear and respect.
Life returned, disguised as routine.
Knowledge was rebellion, written in silence.
Strength whispered until it was ready to roar. The oppressor never truly sleeps.
Ritual became armor against despair.
He carried the weight of centuries yet unborn.
The sky rehearsed war, while men rehearsed hope.
Plans were written in smoke and erased by dawn. Freedom traveled faster than any decree. History knocks softly before breaking the door. The young capital learned to shine through shadow.
His faith became the flag no enemy could steal.
Fire advanced quietly across the sleeping land. Redemption often bleeds before it blooms. Even tyranny can drown beneath its own reflection. Victory spoke softly. It had seen too much death.
True triumph is measured in what remains.
Light returned as the answer to endurance. Words became weapons, sharper than blades. Politics learned to pray beneath painted saints. The fortress began to dream of empire.
Peace tasted fragile, sweet as thawing snow.
Curiosity became the quiet twin of ambition.
Steel learned the art of mercy.
Blessing became declaration, more potent than arms.
The city awoke to find itself unafraid.
His patience had carved eternity into wood and stone.
Life persisted with the rhythm of faith. Sound became the signature of resilience. Even games remembered the taste of courage. Wisdom shimmered again beneath the hand of grace. Gratitude sealed what conquest could not earn.
Heaven marked the rebirth of a nation with fire.
Devotion marched where armies had failed.
From ashes rose the voice that would rule centuries.
Light crowned the city, born of endurance.
Spring arrived, as proof that time forgives.
Music became the soul's return to daylight.
Faith and steel fused into one destiny.
A whisper became the voice of empire. Life had turned full circle, and hope took root. Each flame guarded the memory of survival.
Diplomacy endured where swords had failed.
Legacy begins where ambition learns restraint.
Morning sounded like forgiveness given shape.
Faith watered the soil of rebirth.
Prosperity returned, draped in silk and laughter. Innocence rebuilt what war had undone. Words outlasted empires, carved into eternity. Peace mirrored heaven more clearly than victory.
She offered steel so that faith might rule instead.
From solitude, a nation had learned its song.
The storm had passed, but its echo would remain. A builder rests. The city keeps breathing.
The soul of Rus had found its new heart.
From ruin to resurrection, the spirit marched onward.
Thus began the rise of Moscow, destined for crown and cross.
History awakened beneath the northern light.
The age of suffering closed, and the age of Tsars began.
The storm withdrew, leaving silence heavy as prayer. Memory lingered where glory turned to dust. Even broken sound carried the pulse of endurance. From ruined soil, resilience began to bloom.
Innocence kept the flame when faith was tired.
The newborn capital breathed between past and future. Hope traveled barefoot, yet unafraid.
Water carried away centuries of sorrow.
Steel remembered the heat that made it pure. Faith polished the scars until they shone as stars.
Migration mirrored the soul's return home.
From sacrifice came the seed of guardianship. Harmony rose where conquest had fallen.
The builder became legend as his city became fate.
The land exhaled, free at last to dream again. Thus ended the age of chains and began the age of crowns. The sun returned to find a nation reborn from prayer.
Power bowed before faith, only to rise more dangerous. A throne was born from the echo of fear and awe. Greatness and madness shared the same mirror.
Heaven trembled at the noise of empire awakening. Loyalty became the silence between heartbeats.
Fear was written into the very rhythm of power.
Even kings cannot command the storms within.
The price of power is always measured in blood.
The empire mourned behind its own golden walls. Expansion demanded both faith and flame. The throne endured, even as names changed. The world widened to match ambition's breath.
A symbol rose that would outlast kingdoms.
Knowledge became worship, written in ink. Wood dreamed of waves long before sails were born. Curiosity burned brighter than conquest.
Empire learned to float upon its own creation.
Russia reached the ocean and saw itself reflected. He found destiny not on land, but in horizon's whisper. From swamped and dream, a new capital was born. Progress always arrives dressed in suffering.
Gaith built the skyline, while ambition paved it.
Knowledge became law, and law became revolution.
Beauty learned to coexist with violence.
The world began to pronounce Russia's name with reverence. Winter tested every dream built on water.
He saw Europe not as rival, but as mirror.
Civilization shines brightest when newly born.
Joy returned, disguised as survival. He built empire as if defying the sea itself. Expansion became a hymn sung by wind. Triumph spoke in thunder to silence the past.
The dream turned to monument before the man had died.
Greatness leaves beauty and burden in equal measure.
A new mind rose beneath the crown's old weight.
Wisdom dared to question even divinity.
Art became empire's gentlest weapon.
Grace softened the echo of command.
Thought became rule, and ink became power.
Wealth and want shared the same muddy road. Portraits outlived the people who pretended to be eternal.
Glory never sleeps without a storm nearby.
Majesty found its calm in motion.
Knowledge and conquest drank from the same cup.
Borders swelled like breath beneath her hand.
The empire's wealth was measured in endurance.
Russia touched the sun, where once it feared the sea.
Expansion became the rhythm of survival.
She dreamed of eternity, written in geography.
Beauty rested uneasy beneath frost and rule.
Reason and faith shared the same ceiling.
The next generation was built from both ink and armor.
Harmony masked the fatigue of empire.
Legacy is ink that refuses to fade.
The city mourned its mind, as if it were its heart.
Even marble breathes when history pauses. Life continued as the quiet pulse of empire.
Faith endured, polished by time's slow hand.
Vastness itself became a symbol of survival.
Trade replaced conquest as empire's bloodstream.
Knowledge turned the common man into citizen. Memory froze into monument and refused to thaw.
Culture sang where cannons once spoke.
Gratitude became the empire's unseen architecture. Power always leaves a shadow long after it departs.
Beauty held its breath between seasons.
The frontier whispered promises of destiny still untamed.
Eternity looked down and saw itself mirrored.
Power bowed before the illusion of peace.
History always stirs beneath calm skies.
The empire breathed between pride and prophecy.
The voice of empire is never truly silent.
She dreamed of equality, but woke to snow.
Memory became both shrine and warning.
Discipline replaced faith as the nation's prayer.
Time held its breath between eras.
The next age began quietly, beneath ink and snow.
Greatness had become its own burden.
The storm of revolutions waited in the distance.
Even beauty sensed the tremor of change.
Faith whispered warnings no one wished to hear.
Restlessness is the first note of uprising.
Compassion and rebellion shared the same brush.
Truth slipped quietly into the ballroom of illusion.
Power ignored the storm until it was inside.
Splendor became prelude to silence.
Ink began to sound like thunder.
Order trembled at the edge of obedience. The Empire stood vast and vulnerable.
The old world waited for its reckoning.
Every era ends with one breath of wax and flame.
The ground itself remembered oppression.
The revolution began as a whisper in verse.
Luxury always flinches before justice arrives.
Faith braced itself once more for history's test.
Change always begins with the color of blood.
Destiny approached in the footsteps of the poor.
The Golden Age closed its eyes without knowing.
Thus ended the Empire of Faith, and began the storm of empires.
Even marble could feel the weight of history turning.
Every empire frays first at the edges of its glory.
Fear walks quietly before revolution learns to speak.
Hunger sharpened truth more than any blade.
Loyalty starved long before it broke.
Industry rose like a god demanding sacrifice. Progress raced ahead, leaving souls behind.
Words became weapons, smuggled in paper.
Faith echoed through emptiness like unanswered prayer.
He ruled a beauty, already turning to glass.
Footsteps became thunder, rolling toward the throne.
Obedience trembled beneath the weight of conscience. History gasped and bled upon its own doorstep. Rebellion found its banner in a single gesture. The song of labor turned into the cry of revolt.
Even heaven waited for the noise to fade.
Icons changed faces, but the hunger stayed the same.
The sky announced what men already knew. A nation awoke, with fire in its veins. Thus ended the empire of crowns, and began the empire of crowds. The city woke beneath the weight of restless dreams.
Authority stood trembling on the edge of its own shadow.
Hope marched beside fear, inseparable and alive.
He watched the world move without him for the first time.
The rhythm of machines became the heartbeat of rebellion.
Hunger became a weapon, sharper than any blade.
Brotherhood broke the silence of centuries.
Color replaced crown as the language of power.
1,000 years of rule ended in one breath.
Freedom arrived without knowing what it truly meant.
The voice of ideology returned from exile to rewrite the world.
Faith shifted from heaven to the hands of men.
Symbols fell, but belief rose higher than flags. Words became bullets that no army could stop.
Revolution burned in the light of its own chaos.
Faith clashed with fury, and both refused to die.
Promise became scripture, written on breath and frost.
The new nation traveled faster than its heart could follow. Ideals marched where armies once obeyed.
The storm had found its rhythm and its hymn.
Progress learned the cost of its own conviction. Revolution devoured the very soil it promised to save.
Every victory carried its own funeral.
Morning came, but peace did not.
Authority reborn in ink instead of crowns.
Industry became the new cathedral of belief.
Knowledge learned to kneel before ideology.
Steel replaced miracle as proof of progress.
The mortal turned myth before the body cooled.
A silence too vast to mourn filled the air. Ambition watched death and saw opportunity. The nation built itself on thunder and fear. Sacrifice turned to suffering beneath the red dawn.
Love survived
where justice did not.
Power learned to speak in monuments. The cult of vision replaced the warmth of voice. Joy rehearsed its part beneath watchful skies.
Discipline became the heartbeat of empire reborn.
Spectacle replaced scripture as the faith of the century.
Fear became the language of survival.
Security demanded sleeplessness.
The new gods were carved from concrete.
Innocence floated above the weight of ideology.
The dream of flight replaced the prayer for heaven.
Movement itself became a kind of belief. Creation and destruction danced in the same fire. Power learned to smile without warmth.
Memory survived, hidden in the cracks of progress.
The storm returned, wearing the face of war. The world burned and called it salvation. Every brick became a prayer for survival.
Compassion held the line where steel could not.
Endurance turned the tide more than victory did. Patience became the deadliest weapon.
Triumph rose from rubble like resurrection.
The capital endured, colder but unbowed.
Memory lay buried, yet unforgotten.
Joy returned, carrying the weight of ghosts.
The heavens mimicked the light men had stolen.
Glory and grief became one nation.
Renewal marched in rhythm with loss. Knowledge looked upward to forget what it had seen below.
Ideals became lullabies for another generation!
Expansion stretched to the ends of cold and time.
Art survived by learning to whisper.
The storm quieted, but its echo filled the air.
Reverence replaced religion beneath red marble.
Mankind's reach outgrew the gravity of grief. Russia touched the stars and found itself reflected. The impossible had become ordinary.
Humanity saw itself whole for the first time.
In that radiant silence, courage revealed its brightest smile.
A dream whispered across eternity,
we endure.
Heaven had been reached, yet home felt holier.
Progress resumed its endless chant. Victory became inheritance, not event.
The empire stood vast, both scarred and radiant.
Thus ended the storm of empires, and began the Red Dawn.
Triumph lingered, but the air already smelled of caution.
Glory aged quickly beneath the weight of memory.
Hope was rehearsed each morning like a hymn.
Reconstruction sang softly through steel and ash.
The future took shape in graphite and dream. Civilization looked skyward again, unbroken.
Power learned to smile through marble and thunder.
Fear became invisible, yet everywhere. Truth survived only by turning into song.
The nation kept moving, even when standing still.
Modernity glowed faintly through the smoke of its making.
Peace stood armed beneath the trembling heavens. Communication became the new faith of empire.
Knowledge advanced quietly, like a shadow of light.
Art endured where politics demanded silence.
The old and the new shared one uncertain dawn.
Industry burned like a modern altar.
Faith whispered quietly through locked doors.
Power learned to masquerade as peace.
Innocence still dared to trust the sky. Victory meant little without warmth.
Prosperity gleamed where hunger had once reigned.
The old rhythm of Russia kept its heartbeat.
Exploration became the gentle face of ambition.
The human spirit.
Poetry lived between lines too fragile for law.
The machinery of power turned slowly, endlessly.
Every revolution eventually learns to wear a suit.
Authority moved quietly, wrapped in fog.
Brotherhood survived where ideology had grown cold. Color returned where dogma had dimmed the world. Commerce hummed life prayer reborn.
Youth carried the echo of forgotten idealism.
Beauty persisted where hope whispered.
Eternity watched quietly, remembering every storm.
Truth never died. It simply spoke in shadows.
Amid ideologies, the heart still found its freedom.
Memory kept its vigil through generations. The empire breathed beneath stars it had once conquered.
Thus the storm grew quiet, and the red dawn began to rise.
The morning belonged to those who believed the future was theirs.
Unity moved like thunder beneath painted eyes.
Hope took root in the soil of industry.
Labor became the anthem of rebirth.
Knowledge became the faith of a modern world.
Voices traveled faster than prayers ever could.
Machines replaced miracles beneath a patient sky.
Imagination wore the uniform of progress.
The city stretched upward, dreaming of eternity.
Motion itself became the rhythm of survival.
Strength and song marched side by side.
Every sunrise was measured in production and pride.
Curiosity became the empire's purest prayer.
Grace endured, even under iron ceilings.
Belief traveled through static and silence alike.
Youth built, with hands blistered, but hearts unbroken.
The dream of flight replaced the dream of heaven.
Industry burned with the light of conviction.
Ideology painted the face of optimism.
Discipline became beauty in motion. Words resisted quietly behind locked doors.
Sound became monument, and melody turned to flame.
Truth always found a way to breathe.
Travel became the pulse of a restless dream. The universe listened as Russia spoke upward.
Modernity glowed faintly against eternal winter. Power admired its own reflection in calm water.
Innocence wore discipline, like destiny. Hunger was replaced by the pride of creation.
Abundance became the new prayer.
Monuments grew taller than memory. Happiness became an art, carefully arranged.
Beauty survived quietly, between orders and applause.
Ambition prepared to leave the earth itself. Science became poetry, written in fire.
The sky waited for one man's courage.
The nation's heartbeat was printed in ink.
Humanity stood together and looked upward.
He carried Earth's heartbeat into silence. For a moment, borders ceased to exist.
The impossible had become the nation's new memory.
Imagination turned patriotic.
Triumph, taste of metal and wonder.
a single night.
The nation pulsed with mechanical faith.
The stars became
metaphors for courage.
Creativity joined hands with ideology.
Pride circled the globe like a new sun. Greatness always exhales in silence.
Humanity sought warmth beneath its own achievements.
Reflection returned like an old friend, unwelcome yet necessary.
Progress cast long shadows over its own light.
Emotion hid beneath the discipline of survival.
Faith waited patiently in silence.
Truth returned in streaks of color. The rhythm of work outlasted every promise.
Innocence remailed the quiet rebellion.
Ordinary joy became the empire's hidden triumph.
Curiosity reached farther than control could follow.
Destiny looked skyward once more.
The world watched a dream painted in red.
Diplomacy danced beneath suspicion and light.
Music became the soft voice of belief.
The heavens had become the new battlefield.
Pride and fear lived in the same heartbeat.
Every triumph leaves behind its silence.
Hope returned disguised as art.
Knowledge had learned both pride
And doubt.
Memory became the nation's truest inheritance.
The soul remembered its language. Normalcy felt like the rarest luxury.
Freedom whispered through literature before politics allowed it.
Time began to reclaim the empire's stone face.
Laughter defied history once more.
Beauty remembered what power forgot.
Culture became communion across invisible wires.
Warmth survived the coldest ideologies. Movement remained Russia's oldest prayer.
Faith returned softly, unannounced.
Heaven had been touched, and still they sought home.
The Soviet dream shimmered between cosmos and conscience.
Words once feared became celebration.
Harmony became defiance, made beautiful. Time modernized its own ruins.
The symbol endured longer than its makers.
Imagination remained the nation's purest fuel.
The dream began to question itself.
History paused to catch its breath.
The Empire whispered softly to its reflection. Thus the red dawn glowed eternal, half dream, half memory. The hum of progress had become the hush of reflection. The dream slowed, yet its echo lingered in every step. Ideals weathered like paint, noble yet fragile. Words waited for permission to be honest again.
Hunger returned to remind the proud of humility.
Memory stood taller than monuments.
Information replaced truth, and truth became rumor.
Innocence played where ideology had collapsed.
The engines of certainty cooled into quiet doubt.
Stone learned that even eternity can fracture.
Art survived by learning endurance.
Faith returned, not triumphant, but grateful.
Love endured quietly where politics had shouted. Hope found melody in the cracks of despair.
Freedom learned to speak before learning to agree.
A century folded its wings without applause.
History ended with the sound of disbelief.
Symbols fall slower than empires.
The red dawn dimmed, but refused to die.
A new voice rose from the echoes of collapse.
Liberation felt uncertain, like waking from a long dream.
Flight prepared to begin again under new names. Freedom arrived, carrying both promise and price. Truth reintroduced itself shyly to the page.
Joy returned as disbelief painted in light.
Modernity blinked awake beneath an ancient sky.
Chaos dressed itself as opportunity.
Survival remained the nation's oldest art.
The next generation answered with questions.
Old and new shared one heartbeat of becoming.
Art replaced propaganda with confession.
Words tasted free, raw, and real.
Endings never come without inheritance.
The continent exhaled after 70 years of thunder.
Faith harmonized again with innocence.
Celebration masked the tremor of uncertainty.
Continuity carried the soul where ideology failed.
Hope survived quietly, glowing through the cracks.
Thus ended the Red Dawn, and began the long rebirth.
The city breathed between endings and beginnings.
Commerce returned like a cautious heartbeat.
Education remained the quiet promise of tomorrow.
History watched itself soften beneath sunlight. Movement became medicine for a wounded land.
Democracy arrived not with peace, but with noise.
Survival learned patience once more.
Art refused to surrender its corner of the city.
Faith reopened its doors to light.
Love became the nation's first true rebuild.
Identity rose, reborn from memory's ashes.
Language remembered optimism. Imagination replaced ideology.
Remembrance became a public prayer.
Culture returned home, barefoot and proud.
The earth forgave before politics did.
Art rediscovered sincerity.
Memory transformed from grief into guidance.
Ordinary life resumed its quiet heroism.
Hope finally found a voice that stayed.
Spiritual calm returned without ceremony. Diversity arrived carrying curiosity.
The cosmos still called to the Russian heart.
Discovery bridged the silence between past and promise.
Roots once again reached toward light.
Normalcy returned softly, like music.
Sound reclaimed its ancient authority. The next generation began in brightness.
Celebration disguised the cautious heart beneath.
Freedom learned rhythm before rhetoric.
Tradition danced with invention.
Democracy practiced its first uncertain breaths.
The digital age dawned quietly, pixel by pixel. Truth rediscovered its courage.
Faith and color returned side by side. Motion symbolized mercy.
Joy relearned the language of the soil.
Connectivity became the nation's new heartbeat. Wonder traveled farther than borders.
Gratitude bridged generations.
Heaven and science finally shared one canvas.
Renewal shimmered through every droplet.
Nature forgave before man apologized.
Unity returned, wearing music instead of armor.
Truth found beauty in observation.
harmonized at last.
Freedom tasted like coffee and ink.
Exploration remained Russia's quiet religion.
Respect for nature endured beyond change.
Knowledge turned seasons into teachers.
Remembrance shaped the moral spine of rebirth.
Continuity glowed through modernity's glass.
Hands of soil and steel, united again.
Compassion re-entered the architecture of progress.
Dreams pointed skyward once more.
Memory smiled beneath white silence.
Rhythm replaced rigidity.
Celebration lit the language of resilience.
The city mirrored the cosmos it once sought.
Peace finally learned to whisper.
Creation reintroduced itself gently.
Movement regained meaning without command.
Diversity became the anthem of unity.
Tradition found joy in modernization.
Harmony reclaimed the public stage.
Nature held the nation's oldest secret, peace. Faith and science shared one skyline.
Human warmth replaced ideology's chill.
The land forgave its history through light.
The soul of Russia remembered its soul.
Life moved forward, unannounced but unstoppable.
Differences wove harmony instead of division.
Russia watched itself from heaven once more.
The nation spoke again in light.
Knowledge had become freedom's architecture. The sacred and the scientific shared one rhythm.
Generations met within one glow.
The reborn nation glittered like memory made visible. Thus Russia rose again, from silence into light. Time itself bows to the light that never died.
In every generation, innocence plants the future. Faith returns as sound, not command.
The North remembers its own music. Distance taught him the meaning of home.
Kindness remains the nation's truest currency.
Every tree remembers what men forget.
Freedom still chooses the sky.
Creation is how the soul breathes forever.
The earth learned forgiveness through water.
Legacy becomes real only when touched by innocence.
Mystery returns where certainty once stood.
Science and spirit share the same sky.
Music binds centuries into a single breath.
Small lights teach great souls how to endure.
Words remain the guardians of truth.
Every hope must learn to fly alone.
The sky writes poems no empire can erase.
Imagination became the new frontier.
Faith passed hand to hand, flame to flame.
Time forgives, but never forgets.
Poetry kept the soul warm through every storm.
The river remembers its own eternity.
Heaven bent close to listen once more.
Celebration became meditation.
Memory found its canvas in decay.
Wisdom passes quietly between generations.
Silence sings when the world listens.
Home remains the simplest miracle.
Dreams drift beyond currents of fear.
The heart of Russia never truly sleeps.
Purity begins where memory is honest.
Freedom learned to sing out loud.
Art became public breath.
Exploration returned to the soil.
Every river ends where the sky begins.
Warmth outlasts ideology.
Majesty is quiet when earned. Beauty melts, but returns each winter.
Continuity chose joy over sorrow.
The cosmos still answers the Earth's whisper.
Turned pain into praise.
Sacrifice rests, but never disappears. Imagination renews what history has tired. Beauty breathes even in silence.
The past returns as music, not memory.
The whole nation shone like a constellation of forgiveness. Peace reclaimed its throne in quiet.
The future always begins with a small hand.
Thus the soul remembers Dane, and memory becomes light.